Good evening. I'm Diane Lewis. I'm the Chief Programming Officer and EVP of the Paley Center for Media. And it is I've got to get my glasses on. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to a very important and timely discussion about fighting anti-Semitism through tech. This program is part of our ongoing effort to examine media's powerful shaping influence and unique ability to raise awareness around the growing crisis of anti-Semitism. This conversation and all of the events in this PaleyImpact series on the role of media in combating anti-Semitism seek to shine a light on how media in all its forms can educate, inform, and make an impact on this vitally important issue. All programs in this series this year are made possible by Ronald S. Lauder, whom we sincerely thank for his most generous support. Never before has Paley's mission been more vital, as media has become the undisputed connector to a nation in unprecedented times. Paley is uniquely positioned to meet this moment with impactful conversations led by influential figures like we have here tonight. We are honored to bring together leaders and experts from tech, culture, and public policy to discuss the innovative ways tech and gaming is being employed to ensure that the stories and lessons of the Holocaust are being shared with new audiences and preserved for future generations, and as well how cutting-edge technologies are being utilized to educate and counter the alarming rise in anti-Semitism. Tonight you will hear, see, and maybe experience yourself how AI, gaming, augmented reality, and virtual reality are becoming potent tools in fighting anti-Semitism. We are honored to welcome to the Paley stage Holocaust survivor, author, and subject of the new immersive experience, Tell Me Inga Auerbacher, and Stephen Smith, the CEO and co-founder of Storyfile. Stephen is also the Executive Director Emeritus of USC Shoah Foundation. Joining them on stage are Jordana Cutler, Meta's Director of Public Policy and Director of Israel and the Jewish Diaspora, Bernard Cherkasov, CEO of the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center, and Luc Bernard, Director of the first virtual Holocaust Museum, Voices of the Forgotten. We hope that you had the opportunity to visit our state-of-the-art Paley GX studio and VR lab on the 5th floor to demo these impactful gaming and VR experiences that we'll be discussing tonight. And if you didn't have the opportunity to do so before the event, you'll be able to try them after as well. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce a great friend to the Paley Center, our esteemed moderator for the evening, ABC News Chief Business, Tech, and Economics Correspondent, Rebecca Jarvis. Rebecca is also the host and creator of the Dropout podcast, a critically acclaimed multi-year investigation which chronicles the rise and fall of Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes. Rebecca is also an executive producer of the Dropout Hulu series based on her podcast. Rebecca's work can be seen on all ABC News platforms, including Good Morning America, World's News Tonight with David Muir, Nightline, and 2020. Please welcome Rebecca Jarvis.
Thank you for that kind introduction, and it is great to be here with all of you. And I want to get straight to our panelists because they are an incredible bunch of people. So I want to welcome to the stage, first of all, Luc Bernard, Director of Voices of the Forgotten. Come on up, Luc. Bernard Cherkasov, CEO of the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. Jordana Cutler, who's traveled all the way from Israel to be with us at Meta. And Inga Auerbacher, Holocaust survivor and author, as well as Stephen Smith of Storyfile. Please welcome to the stage. So you can see how powerful this new technology can be in educating and transforming minds. And I recall my last conversation here at the Paley Center. We sat with an esteemed panel, and many individuals on that panel were also survivors. And one of their biggest concerns was being forgotten. And here we are in a world of new technology and gaming and new creation to help keep that from happening. Inga, I'd love to start with you.
Yes.
So Inga was introduced to me upstairs or downstairs. I can't recall where we were in the building, somewhere in this building, as a 90-year-old Gen Zer.
Not quite. 1 year less.
89-year-old Gen Zer.
Yes.
Almost 90-year-old Gen Zer. It's very important. I want to get the facts straight. So Inga, how did you come to this project and what did you make of it when you saw it for the first time?
Well, I think it's a wonderful way, especially in today's day, of this whole a new method of teaching things. And it's appropriate because the young people, they all have their cell phones, they all like all these techniques, all these new ones, and they will be interested to learn this terrible topic in a brand new way. That is very important. And any age, actually, it can start quite early. It's important to start early because children grow up, they hear terrible stories from other children, from their families, and they can say, you know, I saw this and it was very different and it touched my heart. And that's what we want to do, is touch their hearts, young in life, because that's when you can get into their skin, so to speak, about terrible stories like that. And it's not just books, it's not just movies, but this technique where you can actually speak to the person in the production. I think it's a wonderful, unique idea.
And Stephen, how did Storyfile get involved in the Tell Me Inga series?
Well, originally, when USC Shoah Foundation was developing a program to preserve Holocaust survivors, Heather Mayo, who's in the room here somewhere, came up with the idea and discussed with me the fact that she'd had a conversation with a Holocaust survivor that day in 2010, and she wanted to make sure that her unborn grandchildren would be able to have that same conversation. And I said, how are you going to do that? And we didn't know, actually. And over a 10-year period, we developed something called conversational video AI, which Storyfile now has a technology platform for that. So anybody can tell their story in a conversational way. So you ask questions of somebody, and they're able to answer those questions. And I'd previously worked with Jordana when I was at USC Shoah Foundation. And she and Johannes and Maria, who are also here from Berlin, were working on a project to try and ensure that the stories of the Holocaust survivors are not only preserved, but put into a format that young people could access them in schools and in other places. And so we worked together to try and work out, if you were going to have a conversation with somebody in VR so that you could be surrounded by the story and immersed in the story, what would that be like? Now, I had been Facebook messengered, tweeted, texted by a lady in New York called Inga Auerbacher. And I knew that she was extremely tech savvy, but I also knew that she understood the power of audience. And she'd said to me, I want to find the best way to reach the biggest audience. So I called her and I said, I think I have something for you. Would you like to work on this project together in order to tell your story for a younger generation so that they can converse with you and immerse themselves in your story for many years to come?
And when you talk about that immersion and immersing oneself in the story, we saw in the video a lot of children were wearing the Oculus. Jordana, they're able to then see Tell Me Inga through that Oculus.
Yeah, one of the amazing things about the Tell Me Inga story is that while it is available in VR, it's also available on desktop and mobile. We didn't want that device to be the barrier for people to have to hear Inga's story. We think in the future more people will be able to experience things in VR in our quest. But until that time, we wanted to make sure that people could experience in any kind of platform. And so the experience, while much more immersive and impactful in our view, when you experience it in VR, you don't have to have the device in order to experience it.
Bernard, in Illinois at the Holocaust Museum, how do you integrate technology into the experience, and how do you see that playing a role in addition to being in a museum?
Yeah, we really see it as an extension of our mission to use technology in cutting-edge ways to deliver Holocaust education. We want to meet our audiences where we are. I'm a dad to a 13-and-a-half-year-old, and I know that the way she processes information, the way she gets information, is not the way that even my nephews and were doing it 10 years ago, and the way that I was doing it decades before that. And so we've got to meet our learners where they are. And so we have virtual reality films. People can come to our museum and put on the Oculus headsets, and suddenly they're transported. The preview that you saw, Walk to Westerbork with Rode Glass. I've been at the museum for just about 8 months now. In my first few days, I remember seeing Rode's film for the first time, and you put on, unless you do this, it's really hard to picture just how powerful this experience is. Suddenly you are in Amsterdam, standing at the canals, and when Rode says, "This is the home where I grew up," you can look up and look around. When she walks you through her apartment where her first memories are formed, you can see the windows that she used to look out of and see her friends on the streets. When she talks about, when she's transported to Westerbork, and she's walking through that space, you're there with her, and when she's telling the story, you can actually look around and see everything around you. Right? It's quite powerful. Our window of being able to hear from survivors, unfortunately, is closing, but the next best thing is to be able to hear survivors' words directly from them and their stories in a way that technology allows us to do that nowadays.
And Luke, I want to come to you because the video that we saw was the person running up the stairs, or the thing that ran up the stairs into the museum. Just to give a sense for how real this is, Gideon Lev, whose story was told in that short clip, was in the same camp, I understand, as you, Inga.
Same age.
Same age. So here we have this world that is created in a virtual reality, but it is very much reality. Talk about the importance of that in your creation.
Well, I mean, I would say for the museum very much, I just saw that 8% of Americans haven't been to a Holocaust museum, and that we just needed to kind of build virtual museums so kind of everyone could have access to a museum. So, but funny enough, that the Guidon exhibit, for example, it took us a day to make. So Guidon, he pretty much, because when I asked him to record it, I was like, tell the story of your family, of the family that you lost, because I believe there's 6 million stories to be told, and we don't tell them enough. We don't. And so that's what he did, and it's kind of 8 minutes long when you kind of walk around. But pretty much only took us a day. So I'm kind of showing how much virtual museums, you can just build things so quick, and you can reach, I mean, billions of people, pretty much. You can. I mean, Fortnite has like around 200 million active users, and Epic were really nice because you're not allowed to build what I built, pretty much. Like, you're not allowed to build a museum about genocide inside Fortnite. But since I'd already worked with them before, they really believed in what I was doing. So that goal of that Fortnite museum is really to kind of, show everyone how we can use digital, very much. So that's really the goal of it.
Well, and I think one of the interesting elements of what everyone here is doing, there is such a conversation right now around technology and the spread of anti-Semitism. And that entire conversation is about how to, at this moment in time, so much of the conversation is about how to limit anti-Semitism online. Whereas the world that you are offering is one that combats anti-Semitism through a completely new framework. How important is that, Stephen, to your creation?
Well, I think, we've got this title, Fighting Antisemitism Through Tech. So what is fighting anti-Semitism? It implies that we're going into some kind of combat, some kind of, confrontation with anti-Semites. And yet, the vast majority of people who are online are not anti-Semites. The vast majority of people's hearts and minds are to be won, or they may even be curious, but we are not putting the content in front of them to learn because we're afraid of the technology itself or the medium itself. The medium in this case, I think, is part of the message, as we just saw here. The fact that most of these titles are using the voice of survivors is very powerful and very potent because, in a sense, they are the counter voice to the voice of the deniers. And we spend so much time focused on a very small number of people. You know, at the Shoah Foundation, when I worked there, I spent virtually no time on Holocaust deniers. What I spent time on was building the audience from 50,000 students to 20 million students. That's what we focused on, because then you're actually, I often say that if you were to go and get a neo-Nazi rally, and we worry when we see 20, 50, 100 people show up, and so we should. The ideology is evil, and it's committed genocide in the lifetime of people sitting on this stage. But there are more people turned out here tonight to listen to this than turn up for those rallies. There are more of us, and we've got to play to that power much more, including in our digital world, because we have nothing to be afraid of, as dangerous as they are, and we've got everything that we need among these people here and you to actually fight it through the way in which we tell the story and which we help those others to understand.
Luke, you talked about how easy it was essentially to do this work.
Yeah, so basically I've managed to get Nick Fuentes camp banned twice. I have, like a month ago, Made International News had to deal with all his group of neo-Nazis, things like that. The thing is, pretty much a lot of anti-Semitism organizations don't understand how tech works or how this new wave of anti-Semitism is working, or even like code words, things like that. Like, it's very easy, it just takes time. And so when, basically, because even at one point, pretty much with all the online hate I was getting on Twitter, even the Israeli government basically got involved. And that to me was a huge problem. Because I'm not Israeli, not because the Israeli government got involved, but pretty much no American organization came to help on this, pretty much. And so I actually have like kind of a lot of fear, like in America, like organizations need to kind of get it together a bit more. Like, it's not just about implementing Meta or all these platforms like implement policies, right? Because then just leaving it, because people go around, they find code words or things like that. Say, for example, Fortnite got an F pretty much from the ADL. Worse than Twitter it did. But then Epic, basically what they did was they were kind of like this, put a Holocaust museum inside Fortnite, which in my opinion actually does way better than just having a policy for, say, for example, Holocaust denial inside a video game where no one's really denying the Holocaust, pretty much. So I do believe a lot more in kind of what all of us do, where it's like, we need to put the content out there, we need to be reaching people. Say, for example, video games, right, are bigger than music and movies combined. It's honestly, utterly insane that I was kind of the first person to make a video game about the Holocaust, and 6 months later, I make a virtual museum inside Fortnite. But also, it's not kind of, how can I say, because people don't understand video games, right? There's been a lot of hard lines before where it's like the Holocaust can never be done in a video game, things like that. And that has held back our industry. And I think that's held back Holocaust awareness in general, very much too. So it really took me having to self-fund all these things, release them for free, to kind of show it can be done and done right. And also, say, for example, now saying, Light in the Darkness, we've had over 330,000 people have finished it. Keyword finished. And $0 spent on marketing. People want to learn. People are into these things. They are. The video game crowd is into these things. Kind of, to Stephen's point, like, people want to learn. But we kind of need to try out kind of new things, you know, because basically everyone, you know, this panel, everything we're all doing. So that's why I do actually think the future is bright. I think we can fight this. I think we will win. But I think we need to have people stop holding us back and stop telling us we can't do this, we can't do that.
Inga, what did your family, your friends think when they saw Tell Me Inga? Or when you told them you were going to do it?
Well, I told them I'm going to do it.
And they said, like she always does.
Well, they know that I've traveled all over the world practically to speak to any age, maybe 1 million people, as far as Moscow, New Zealand. And there was always a tremendous interest in this topic. And I get letters and invitations to weddings from some of these people where I have spoken. They were little kids at that time, maybe 10-year-olds, middle school, and they remember me and invite me. So they kept something of my story in their minds. It stuck.
And you told an amazing story upstairs about being spotted and the importance of sharing stories with people when they are young.
Oh, I have to tell this one. Okay. We arrive at immigration. We've been in Berlin. We've gone to Meta to launch the German version of this, of Tell Me Inga. We come back. I get the grumpiest immigration officer. She was like having a bad day. She took my passport. Inga was behind me in the wheelchair, which she hated, by the way.
I'll be out of it soon.
And she opened the passport and she looked, where you go? I went to Germany, what were you doing? I was at Meta, what were you doing there? Holocaust project, okay. She closed it. She opened the next passport and she stood and she goes, Mrs. Auerbacher, you came to my school. You came to my school. I have your book by my bedside table. And this grumpy face was beaming with delight. She said, I have a real celebrity at my booth. And she was just a beautiful moment of the power of the story. It was just, sorry, I took the story.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
It is.
It really happened.
It is a beautiful story, and it goes to show you the importance of storytelling and the importance of putting a face on reality and helping people to connect with that. Jordana, in your role, you also have the Anne Frank VR House Tour with Meta. Can you talk a little bit about how Meta, in a bigger picture, is thinking about this and the importance of this kind of education in social media?
Sure, and I think that, as you might have noticed, we changed our name to Meta. And part of our vision in the Metaverse is thinking about the future of the internet. And as we do that, I think it's important that we look at all the different platforms that we have. So you're asking kind of about the different projects and the things we do. And when I try to think about them, it's not just looking at today, but also what we need to think about for the future. One of the privileges I have in my role, which I created very uniquely, I don't think there's another person in a tech company with the title Jewish Diaspora. I'm very happy for some competition if anyone else wants to try. But one of the privileges I get in that job is to really sit with Jewish communities around the world and think about how can I empower what they're saying on a local level and figure out how we can, on a global platform, find answers to that. And some of that is definitely working on those content issues that you mentioned earlier about removing content that is hate speech or targeting Jews or things that make Jewish people feel unsafe. And we spend a lot of time working with partners around the world to make sure we're getting it right, whether having things like Holocaust denial and distortion not allowed on our platforms, having a very nuanced policy on not allowing even harmful stereotypes of saying Jews run the world called out as hate speech, always looking at code words like you mentioned earlier and making sure to update our policy. So we spend a lot of time on that, and I think it's important just to mention that. But also, how can we use our product to drive people to authoritative information about issues like the Holocaust? So one of the partnerships I'm really proud of is one that we have with the World Jewish Congress and UNESCO. So any people on our platform that search for terms about the Holocaust or Holocaust denial are given a box that explains what the Holocaust was. So we take that real estate opportunity right there on your phone to tell you what it was. And then we encourage you to leave Facebook and go to this website that has factual information. And so, again, there's things that we can do in terms of removing content, but then also pushing good information to people. And that's on the Facebook side of things and Instagram. Then we can think about, you mentioned Anne Frank, what can we do in our new platforms? What can we do when we're looking at the future, not just of VR, virtual reality, but also augmented reality, AR, and then XR, which is mixed reality. So in all of these different formulations of what we look at as the metaverse, what can we be doing? And Anne Frank, which anyone who has a Quest that's available like on the App Store right there, is a really early example. It's already a few years old. So I hope that you guys, when you go and look at the room and you touch and feel that, just know that things are only going to get better. Like that experience, which was an amazing partnership we had with the Anne Frank House, was one of the first things we did when we started investing in how we can look at these technologies to really educate people. And one of the things that I think is so special with the Tell Me Inga project, instead of it just being an experience with Inga, which is so powerful, we've partnered with the Claims Conference alongside World Jewish Congress and UNESCO, who've put together an educational curriculum that Claims funded to make sure that it's not just a one-off experience, but that we're really helping teachers to take this experience and do more with it in the classroom so that students don't just say, we met Inga and that was wonderful, but then they really dive deep into it and learn more.
Well, and I find it really interesting also your point that you are redirecting people to information as well as part of the work that Meta does.
And we can't do that without the partnerships, right? And so I think that that's what's so, on that example, World Jewish Congress and UNESCO created an amazing resource that any user in the world is going to be told, if you're looking for information about the Holocaust, please go here. And that's much more valuable and credible when coming from an authoritative partner, not just coming from us, Meta, a private company.
How did the Holocaust Museum come to partner with Shoah? And tell us a little bit about future VR plans as well.
Yeah. It was about 10 years ago, actually, Stephen, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that we were on parallel tracks with USC Shoah at the museum, which is housed in the Chicagoland area, which is home to one of the largest survivor communities in diaspora, if not the largest survivor community. We were trying to figure out how to face the world where there are fewer and fewer survivors, and I hope they live, very long lives. And how to deliver that content and connect learners to survivors and their own voices. And at the same time, Stephen and the USC Shoah Foundation was working on these Dimensions in Testimony holography project. 2013, about 10 years ago, they approached the museum and you flew out to Chicago and did a demonstration for our survivors and team members and other stakeholders. And once people saw the power of Pincus, being able to ask his holograph, right, but his image, questions and him being able to answer that, people were just blown away with it. And so now we have 15 holograms of the museum. A majority of them are local to Chicagoland. And literally we have a purpose-built theater where students can come after they've toured the museum and sit in front of Fritzi Fritzschall and ask her, what is her earliest memory? What was it like, to be separated from her family? How did she find hope? What does she remember about coming to America? And Fritzi, in her own voice, will sit there on the stage as a three-dimensional, lifelike person and will answer those questions for you. And I've got to tell you, when we ask students and visitors to our museum about their experience, this ability to communicate and hear from the survivor in their own voice is transformative to them. And in a way, it also does the opposite. I think sometimes when you walk away from just reading a plaque, right, it's an inanimate object and you don't get the emotion from it. And so it provides that extra level of connection to the person telling their own personal story.
Luke, you mentioned 330,000 people finished the game. Yep. What has been the response from the gaming community and the Jewish community?
So I'd say from the gaming, people that play the game, they end up in tears at the end, because also, long story short, all the characters do die at the end. Because they needed to portray the Holocaust accurately, which was most people did die. And so I think that's really also brings really the emotional thing too. And from the Jewish community, listen, I've kind of been talking to every single organization now, so it's gone really well. It has. I think, yet again, we've managed to push a lot of organizations to kind of come into or to embrace video games, very much. So, but I'd also say too, with all these new technologies, we can also tell the stories of those who died. We can really tell immersive stories. We can, because again, there's so many, because even inside the Holocaust Museum was in Fortnite. There's one thing which I don't like too much, the way Holocaust education is done, is that they kind of put the numbers first and not humans first. And so within the Holocaust Museum within Fauna, I kind of told their stories, who they were. Like Eva Kosheva, she found the first lesbian bar in New York. She did. She was deported to Auschwitz and died. But her life is phenomenal, who she was, not just her death. So I kind of did that with all these kind of different panels, and I think that's really what's resonating with people. And then, again, with kind of new technology we have, we can actually bring these stories to life. We can. So that's one thing which I really like to focus on is people's lives as much as the horrific things they went through. Because with the Light and Darkness, the way it works is because half of the game you actually kind of growing attached to these characters. So after the ad's over, you're attached to them. You are. So that's why I think, the way we kind of educate about the Holocaust, and every part in America is different, right? But I really think we need to be putting the humanity part first and actually telling people stories, who they were as human, not just how they died, pretty much.
Maybe I could just build on that a little, Rebecca. Luke's touching on a very, very important part here. As we talk about the passage from living memory to history, what we've tended to do in the past is turn history into objects of the past. And that is true of our archives too. We go to an archive, we find the object, it could be a document, it could be a testimony of a living person who told a story, and we listen to that and we look at that and we observe it, we analyze it, we put it onto a wall, into a museum. What this technology allows us to do is to change that from being us looking at an object to becoming a co-subject with that person who went through it, which is exactly what Luke was saying. These technologies like we're seeing here allow us to come alongside the individual and have lived experience with them. So that Inga, when she tells her story in Tell Me Inga, it's no longer just objectified. I'm watching you telling a story, and now the narrative has been put together by an editor, which will go from the beginning to the end, and when it's done, I'll take from it what I want to take from it. Now you have to use your curiosity and immerse yourself in the journey of the individual and come alongside her. And I think that's what these technologies allow us to do. And that will help us to ensure that history does not just end up on the bookshelves or in the archives, but is living history in our lives. That's a radical change and a good one.
What do you say to perhaps the skeptics who are concerned about technology, the introduction of technology into such an important and delicate topic?
Well, for certain, we have to be very careful about how we represent the past. We have to approach it with humility, always. We should never put technology ahead of the story and of the lives of those individuals. Technology should be there to support us in telling the story that needs to be told, not for the benefit of technology, for its own sake. And there is a temptation to do that because there's lots of shiny objects right now,
Of course.
including deep fakes and all the ways in which we can use AI. So those of us who are involved in technology, and that includes Meta and Storyfar, both of whom have technology platforms, we agonize over every decision that we make because we know it has impacts on people's lives, the decisions that we make about how we release something or how AI is used, and it can and will be used for harm. But a little like I said earlier about the Holocaust deniers and the anti-Semites, there are many more of us who want to use these same technologies for the benefit of social good and for the public and for the benefit of our world. There just needs to be more of us, and we need to be very active. And then I think we'll make good decisions, and I hope it'll be, beneficial, as long as we always approach it with humility.
And I can imagine there are restrictions, like, for example, a composite character. Perhaps that would be an area where you wouldn't want to go based on people's understanding of the events as they happened.
Inga, what do you think about do you speak French?
Nope.
What do you think about the fact that you can now speak French? What do you think about the fact that you can now speak French and Spanish?
Well, that is something that can be done with the knowledge and the ways that this new technology can go to any country, and I hope I'll go to many more. I can speak Spanish, I can speak French. I have an aide right now, she's Mexican, and I said, I learned Spanish overnight. Wow, what did you do? And I played it for her. And she said, that's fantastic. I understand every word. Then I have a friend who works at the United Nations. She's born in Paris. I said, I got to show you something. I learned again. I learned French. Yeah, right. And I played it for her. She said, unbelievable. You even speak with a German accent.
So I think that's the power of it.
Yes.
Is that that's an extra 700 million people right there, you know. And so I think you can deploy this in really good ways. Done well.
And it's done in a tremendously well done thing, you know. People can really say, hey, she's really French, or she's really Spanish. I'm waiting now to go to the Arabian countries where I speak Arabic. And that will come, hopefully.
Inga, did you have any reservations? Were there any concerns going into this? And how did you voice those concerns?
No, I had no concern about that. The more, the better. And by the way, I would like to say something. A few years ago, I was at the United Nations at the memorial ceremony, and outside there was a lady waiting with a tremendous butterfly, an ornament. And I said, waiting to go inside. And I said, oh, you have a beautiful butterfly. She said, yes, it's my favorite pin, knowing nothing. Now, the butterfly became the symbol of the murdered 1.5 million Jewish children. There was a boy in Terezin or Theresienstadt who wrote a poem, a teenager, I never saw another butterfly. And that symbol became the symbol, of these 1.5 million children. He was killed in Auschwitz, as were most of them. And I'm wearing that symbol today in honor of those 1.5 million innocent Jewish children. Even my scarf has it on it.
May their memories be a blessing.
Thank you.
Jordana, when you look at the metaverse and you look at technology and you look at the fight against anti-Semitism, which I'm sure is something everyone in this room is thinking about, where do you see it evolving?
It's a really good question. And I think, the things that we see happening every day in the news make us think, okay, wait, either we're making progress or we're going back. And I think that, if we try to look at it with perspective, we have to look back and say, okay, where is this going and where is it going to take us? I'm 41. I have 3 kids, and I feel like even in my lifetime, I've seen just incredible technological transformations. I was telling someone a story today about a job that I had, and I had to plug my computer into the wall to get the internet, right? So it's not so far away that not only do we remember not having the internet, but the internet wasn't even something that could move around with us. It was something stationary. And so as we see the internet evolve, right, from being the thing that you can plug into the wall to the thing that you can carry in your pocket, wear on your wrist, have in your microwave in your oven, to something that we're wearing in our glasses today, to something that we can project and look at and mix it with the reality that we have, we see the way that we also have the ability to think about how can we use these different technologies not just to combat anti-Semitism, but as somebody who works with Jewish communities, I also think explain who we are to people. How can we combat anti-Semitism if we also skip over who are Jews? Who are we as a people? When people talk about us, I think we need to think about explaining not just the hatred of Jews, but those amazing things that make us proud, sharing holiday celebrations, sharing culture, sharing food, sharing the positive things about the Jewish people. And so when I look at the way we're using technologies for those things, it's things like doing Torah learning sessions in the Metaverse and bringing Jews together from Australia and New York and Israel and from around the world to learn together, to celebrate holidays together, maybe one day hear the Megillah or a Torah reading together. So I think as we look at that transformation, I think we can definitely use it to combat anti-Semitism, which is something that we're thinking about here on the stage all the time. But I want to make sure that in my position, I'm also thinking about how we can use it to enhance the Jewish people and strengthen us in addition to only using it as a tool to combat the hate against us.
Bernard, I know you have a lot of plans of things that you plan to do with it.
Yes. So first of all, for our new technological advancements. So taking the VR experience on the road, we're developing, it's not quite public yet, but I'm sharing with all of you, I'm so happy. We're gonna have these VR trunks that travel to schools all around the region, so that if you can't make it to our museum to have these VR experiences, the museum will come to your school or your public library where you can experience those. And these aren't, huge commitments of time. You can, one of our shorter films is just a matter of like 10 minutes. On the longer side, it's a 20-minute experience. And suddenly you're transported and you get to hear this first-hand account. But there's something I would say that if there's something that I want people who are passionate about combating anti-Semitism, about education to walk away from these experiences, whether they're virtual reality or by visiting a museum, is that the Holocaust was never inevitable. It is a result of deliberate choices that individuals made, right? Individuals who chose to perpetrate, individuals who chose to bystand, individuals who chose to resist, individuals who chose to collaborate, and to walk away, to Luke's point, that sometimes the story is all about the numbers and the numbers are overwhelming, but to walk away and hear individual accounts of how somebody survived, somebody who helped them along the way, somebody who rescued, you hear this in our virtual reality films about this Catholic family in rural France that sheltered these Jewish kids and passed them off as children of their own, about this convent, about these Jewish partisans, right, in the resistance. That's empowering. So what I would want people to walk away from these experiences is to know that we all have agency, and there's something that we can do in a whole variety of ways to fight anti-Semitism, to make this world a better place.
Luke, what do you have in the works?
So I'm busy porting Light and Darkness to kind of every platform possible, very much. I'm helping like a known Holocaust museum I can't mention, pretty much to bring it digitally. Just recreate it. And I told them the only way I'd do it is if it's free, so available to everyone, and two, that there's an exhibit about Sephardic Jews during the Holocaust, because that's one thing which I discovered in America. A lot of people have no clue about Sephardic Jews in North Africa, even people who work at museums. And so that's one thing. Then we have more video games planned. We basically plan to just take over that entire space. We're also planning like kind of things for museums too, where you can basically immersive experiences for smaller museums. But long story short, we're just planning to take over that 80%. And we do plan to help schools or those things. But when schools come to me, I tell them everything is free. You can take it, you can use it. Just go ahead. Very much, because that's one of my big things is about, because I come from poverty pretty much, and our Holocaust education in France was just Schindler's List, which is very effective, it was actually. And so I kind of think really that everyone just needs equal access to everything, and we need to stop focusing on only people inside cities. That's why it's great what you guys are doing, actually bringing the Holocaust Museum to people that can't go there, and that's what I think digital offers, and that's why when I tell museums which I consult at, I'm like, you shouldn't have 60,000 visitors a year. You should have the entire state. And that's what digital will allow people to do. That. Second, I do actually think there's a bright future. And I think, with everyone kind of involved in this whole panel. So I think the space is going to be so different within 5 years. It is. But again, it kind of took people like us to kind of push the space forward. Because if not, people weren't really willing to budge.
Inga, before we go, to anyone in the audience who's been listening to the panel, fascinated by the work that's been done here, but still a little apprehensive about touching the technology, playing with the technology, what is your advice?
Well, my advice would be to see more of these things. And really what I have in my heart is we have to get to know our neighbors. That can be incorporated. I live in Jamaica, Queens, in a very multi-ethnic community. One side, a Hindu family, the other very devout Muslim family. We're friends. In fact, 2 of them are in the audience today, my Hindu friends. We are one family. And I think this can be incorporated to get to know other people, what they believe, and you can show that in our method and yours also. And it's this bringing together people. And that's where the hate comes from. All Muslims are bad. All Hindus are bad. And you have to bring this in. And this is one method to show an internal family, how they live, what was their story. And it's very realistic. It's very important. And that's my opinion on that. Get to know other people. I've been to so many Hindu temples. I celebrate the holidays with my neighbors. 2 of them, as I said, are here today. And I've been to many mosques. I want to know about other people. Be curious. And this is very important. They can be curious. They're going to meet a little Inga. How did she live? She had a doll. Oh, yeah. She had a doll who went through everything. She went through the camps. She went when she was very sick after the war. And to bring it to a human level. And this is what it does. And you ask me, tell me, Inga, to a human level. Hey, Inga is just like me. I have a doll. I have a mother and father. Unfortunately, these terrible things happen to her. Why? Why? Ask the question. Why? We never want these things to happen again.
Inga, well said. Thank you so much to you.
I just want to take a moment to thank this esteemed panel, to our wonderful moderator. This is an extremely important, very meaningful, and very inspiring conversation. And it's our hope that powerful discussions like these can help shape the public discourse, educate the public, keep these stories alive. I was writing notes why actually we were talking, and also to, of course, influence the negative behaviors and actions that contribute to the crisis of anti-Semitism. So I just wanted to thank everybody, to remind you to go upstairs to see and experience all of these wonderful demos, and to welcome you back again. Thank you very much.